A pro-Palestine supporter tackled a pro-Israel protester, and it all ended in a shooting. Was it a good shoot? Hello, my name is Rachel Moss, and I'm one of the attorneys at the Attorneys for Freedom law firm. I'm here with attorney Marc Victor, and we are going to dive into this story and talk about whether or not it was a good shoot. I'm so excited to talk about this video today, Marc.
Yeah, Rachel, it's fun to do this video with you. I don't get to do too many with you. Usually I'm stuck here doing them with Andy.
But that's tough.
Yeah, Andy got out of this one today because he's out of the office working on a little first-degree murder matter. So I guess we give him a pass on this one. But anyways, glad to be doing the video with you. And so, yeah, let's dive right into this one. This is a really interesting one to talk about. So I'm pumped up to get into the blood and guts of this one.
Okay, I think we should just start by watching the video.
Yeah,
to set the scene,
Yep.
This happened in Newton, Massachusetts.
You are defending genocide.
Genocide?
Yes.
But you are so stupid.
Over 200,000.
You're so stupid. You're stupid. It's another thing. Oh my God. Whoa.
Grab my pistol.
Oh my God.
Grab my pistol.
Oh my
Stop.
God.
Get off it.
What's
Stop.
that?
Get off it. Where's my pistol?
Okay, Marc, what are your initial thoughts watching this video?
Well, look, it's kind of an ugly scene, right? But look, this is America. And so people are entitled to whatever opinion you want. And so the pro-Israel people are on their side of the street. They get to say whatever they want to say. The pro-Palestine guy, he's on his side of the street. He gets to say whatever he wants to say. No problem. Welcome to America. That's how it works here. But when you decide you don't like what someone else says, and then you decide to charge full speed across the street and smash into one of the other protesters who's definitely not presenting a threat to you, and smash him into the concrete, now we got a problem.
Now, this is the perfect example of how aggression is never the correct response to an opinion you disagree with.
Yeah, you got to regulate your emotions, right? Don't get out there and protest if you can't get yourself under control, right? Speech is free, and so say whatever you want. But when it turns into violence, that's when we have a problem. And so what you got is Caleb Gannon. He's 31 years old. He's the guy on the other side of the street who decides the right thing to do is to charge across the street and tackle this other fellow who is named Scott Hayes. Scott's 47 years old. He's an Iraqi war veteran, legally in possession of that firearm. And he's in Massachusetts, which is also my hometown, and I can tell you it's not super easy to get a permit to carry there. Just incidentally, they got a system out there where the chief of police is the one who makes the decision. They were one of those may-issue states, which is now post-Bruin, a shall-issue state, so that's a little side issue. But anyways, Scott Hayes is carrying the firearm peacefully, no problem there. And, of course, he decides best thing to do is to pull out that firearm and shoot the, 16-year younger Caleb Gannon at the time he's on the ground, having just been smashed to the ground. And so this analysis, everybody knows because we go through these a lot in terms of the self-defense analysis. There's no question who the aggressor is here, right? I mean, this Gannon fellow, he's the aggressor. When you charge across the street and tackle someone and smash them into the concrete, you're the aggressor. No question about that. We're not confused on that one. Is the threat imminent? Yeah, there's no doubt about that. When somebody smashes you onto the ground, you're facing an imminent threat. So no question there. It's interesting to pause for a moment. Massachusetts is one of those duty to retreat states. And so the way this works is before you are otherwise able to use or threaten deadly physical force, you have a duty to retreat if you can safely. This isn't going to be a factor in this case. There's no way.
There's no way he could have retreated after someone's tackled him to the ground, holding him down. Even if he made a best effort to crawl under this younger man's grip, who knows if he could get away? Who knows if it'd be safe to do so? I don't think retreat's a big factor here either.
Not a factor here at all. What is a factor here is proportionality, right?
Yes.
That's the issue. And so the question is going to be, did Mr. Hayes use more force than was reasonably necessary? There's no question he gets to defend himself here. Yet he defended himself with ordinary physical force, right? Say he gets into a fist fight with this guy, and he turns out he beats him up, and that this guy's got a bloody nose or broken nose or a black eye or something like that. Sorry, man. That's the breaks. Don't charge people from across the street and start a fight. No question here. I don't think that Hayes would have been charged had he used ordinary physical force against what is arguably ordinary physical force. But that's not the question here. The question here is going to be, is deadly physical force going to be appropriate here? And that's really the answer to the question whether Mr. Hayes was facing a threat of great bodily injury. Sometimes we call this serious physical injury. They really mean the same thing. Massachusetts jury instruction refers to this as great bodily harm. And that's going to be the question that's really going to be presented to the jury here. Ladies and gentlemen, here's what we need you to decide for us at the end of the case. Was Mr. Hayes facing a threat of great bodily harm? If yes, well, then his use of deadly physical force is going to be perfectly fine. If no, well, then you don't get to use deadly physical force. And so that's going to be really the question in this case. It's going to be the only question in this case. And I know that Mr. Hayes, there's a second video. We didn't show it. Maybe we will. He rendered aid immediately after. And I think that was the right thing to do here.
I
It's
agree.
the humanitarian thing to do. It also tends to show Mr. Hayes' mental state, right? He certainly wasn't intending to kill this guy. He's getting him to take his shirt off. He's addressing the wound. He's saying, call 911, get this guy medical help. So clearly he didn't intend to kill this person. I think we could conclude he intended to stop this person. Okay, so we're off to a good start. What is the argument that this is an improper use of force? Well, this is what's going to be the Commonwealth's argument here. You don't get to bring a gun to a fist fight. And what you had here was a fist fight, and Mr. Hayes brought a gun to a fist fight, and you don't get to do that. So that's using excessive force. Therefore, that's why he's charged with the aggravated assault or assault with a deadly weapon and facing 10 years in prison. I'm not really convinced by that argument. What are your thoughts on that?
I am definitely not convinced by that argument.
All right.
There are many factors as defense attorneys that we look for in cases like this to mount our defense. The first thing I would look at is the age difference between the two individuals. Right. As you mentioned, Gannon, the aggressor, was much younger than Hayes.
16-year difference.
16-year difference. And someone in their 30s is typically in the peak of their physical capabilities. Someone a little older than that in their 50s may not be so
Not
much.
so fast here on that one, but okay, for most people, I'll tend to admit probably 31, I was maybe a tad faster, a tad stronger. I don't know. But yeah, there's a 16-year age difference, and that's definitely a factor. And if I'm defending Mr. Hayes, and by the way, I'd love to defend Mr. Hayes on this case.
too.
I don't know if anyone out there knows Mr. Hayes, but if Mr. Hayes calls this law firm, we would be absolutely thrilled to defend him on this case. And that, of course, is one of the things we would point out, that there's a 16-year age difference here in Mr. Gannon's favor for sure.
And the jury gets to take age, size, those types of things into account when determining whether or not Hayes was acting proportionally. Another thing I noticed in the video is that Gannon actually, after he tackled Hayes to the ground, put him in a chokehold. That's very serious because a chokehold clearly can impede your breathing. And many states, where we are, Arizona specifically, and then Massachusetts as well, both have statutes specifically targeting this sort of behavior, recognizing that impeding someone's breathing can cause serious physical injury. And what can you do when someone inflicts force against you that can cause serious physical injury? That and then entitles you to use deadly physical force. So if I was Hayes' attorney, I would point out the fact he was in a chokehold, he was likely having difficulty breathing, he was at risk of serious bodily injury, and therefore he was then entitled to use deadly physical force to defend his life.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I think if I'm defending this case as well, I get out there and say, I agree with the Commonwealth. You just don't get to bring a gun to an ordinary fist fight. But this ain't no ordinary fist fight.
Exactly.
This thing starts with a headlong rush across the street, and it's not clear from that video whether Hayes was sort of collided with by this Gannon fellow from behind, whether he was sort of prepared for this or not. And so I think that's one factor. And I would have them all listed out about why this isn't an ordinary fist fight, right? This guy's running full speed from across the street like this is a old school NFL kickoff, right, where the guys used to run down the field and smash into you. That's the reason they don't do that anymore, because that is extra dangerous. Second, after he smashes into him, he smashes him down on the concrete. This isn't on the turf, right? This isn't on the grass. This is on hard concrete right there. That by itself could cause great bodily injury. And then in your point, if you look carefully at that video, this guy's got an arm what looks like around the neck. Doesn't take an awful long time for somebody to choke you out or maybe break your neck with that kind of a chokehold around the neck. You might say that Mr. Gannon is intending to cause a serious physical injury or great bodily harm with that chokehold, maybe around the neck. So I think all of that gets you outside the ordinary physical force, the ordinary fist fight. And then I think if you look at the video again closely, it looks pretty clear to me that Mr. Gannon is also in a position to kick Mr. Hayes right in the face with his foot. Okay, how long does it take for somebody to kick someone in the face like that after they've been smashed into the concrete, already disoriented, not in a position where he's able to defend himself? One good kick to the face definitely could cause great bodily injury. So I think you've got good arguments here. And, you know, we like to say when you take a case to trial, where are the equities on the case? And I think the equities are with Mr. Hayes on this case because at the end of the day, other than a few people who I think are going to say, no, Gannon did the right thing, he's charging across the street at what is clearly a peaceful Scott Hayes here. So the equities, I think, are on the side of Mr. Hayes. On the other hand, you're in Massachusetts. And this is an anti-gun state.
Yes.
And this is going to be an area where people don't like the fact that you're carrying a gun. They don't like the fact that you didn't just pull it out, but you shot the gun. There are some other things here that I don't know about the case because, of course, you know, we just have this video to look at. It's not like we're getting to sit down with Mr. Hayes. But if we did get to sit down with him, you know, there might be some other issues. And one thing that came to my mind that I wrote down on my notes was this an intentional trigger pull or was this an accidental trigger pull? And if it was an accidental trigger pull, who pulled the trigger? How did it get pulled? You know, when you're on the ground and you're in the middle of this melee and you got a firearm, and of course the gun ends up, you know, not in his possession, so he didn't have it firmly in his possession. For all we know, the trigger was pulled by Caleb Gannon, maybe intentionally, maybe not intentionally. Maybe it was just part of the melee. Maybe he says, I don't even know who pulled the trigger. So all of that could be very relevant information. Of course, we're not privy to what Mr. Hayes would say in an attorney-client meeting. This is why these meetings are so important, because these little types of facts can make a huge difference in analyzing a case. It's the kind of thing that can turn a jury from maybe thinking guilty to maybe thinking not guilty.
Exactly, because Hayes's mental state is very critical here for the self-defense analysis. Something we talk about all the time, we regularly repeat this in these videos, is that if Hayes had a mistake of fact, for example, about what was going on, maybe he thought that Gannon had a weapon.
Right.
Maybe there was something else Hayes saw that caused him to be concerned about deadly physical force. If he had a mistake of fact, that is something the jury is allowed to take into consideration.
It's a great point, right? And that's the kind of thing you develop when you do the case, right? You sit down and you say, hey, man, why'd you shoot this guy? And he says, you know, I thought the guy had a knife. It looked like he had something in his hand. It looked like he was reaching his, maybe. And then you talk to the other witnesses. What did you guys think? And if you get one of them who says, you know, look to me also like he might have had a knife or he had a gun and there was a bulge in his pocket or something like that. Okay, now you're in business because, as you point out, it doesn't actually have to be the truth that he had a knife, right? It seems clear that there was no knife, there was no gun in Gannon's possession. But that's not necessarily the end of the analysis because, as you say, a mistake of fact, which generally has to be a reasonable mistake of fact. If Hayes makes the argument that essentially, look, I thought this guy had a knife, I thought he had a gun, I thought he had something else, even if he, was trying to pick up a rock at the time on the sidewalk and was maybe trying to hit him with that. Remember, in the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin case, of course, it's starting to show my age on this one because this happened a while ago. But the reason Zimmerman got off on that one was because the argument was that Trayvon Martin, who was on top of him at the time, and this was essentially a fist fight as well, the argument was that he was smashing George Zimmerman's head into the concrete. And as I recall, Zimmerman actually had a little bit of injury on the back of his head. And it was that threat of great bodily harm by having your head smashed into the concrete that caused the jury to come back with a not guilty, because that's a threat of great bodily injury, allowing you to threaten or use deadly physical force. Also, it's not clear to me, there's some argument here that maybe Hayes was attempting to use non-deadly physical force. I mean, just because you got a firearm doesn't necessarily mean that, most times it does, right? But there could be a creative argument here that, hey, I was just trying to take the firearm. Maybe I wanted to shoot one in the air or something just as a warning shot to say, hey, leave me alone.
Or defensive display.
Something along those lines. And then there was something that Gannon did that caused it to go off, or it went off by accident, maybe pushed my arm or moved my hand, or I was just trying to get it so he couldn't get it, and then he grabbed my arm and the thing went off. All of that would be very relevant because we can't tell from this video exactly what happened. Everybody is sort of assuming that Hayes pulled out his firearm and intentionally discharged a round into Gannon's abdomen. And maybe that happened, and even if it did, it may very well be defensible in any event. But maybe that's not what happened. Could have been something else. And then also something else that I think is relevant here is the eggshell plaintiff, the eggshell person, the extra vulnerability. Like, Hayes is 47. We don't know what his medical condition is. He might have had some physical condition that would have rendered him more susceptible to even an ordinary punch in the face, right? So we always consider things like disparity, not just of age, but of size. Now, this one looks like Mr. Hayes is probably bigger here. But there might have been something about his physical condition. Maybe he bleeds out easily. Maybe he's got brittle bones. Maybe he just had surgery. He's got some internal problem. Maybe he's healing from something. Like, we don't know any of that. But imagine, just for the sake of discussion, Hayes had just gone through some kind of surgery, and he's got stitches and is something delicate inside, and being smashed to the ground like that could almost do you in, and maybe a little more of that. And he's worried that I'm going to suffer great bodily injury here, or maybe even death. Like, we don't know those facts. Now, if you're going to allege that, you want to prove that up, right? So you want to get his medical records. You want to make the case. You might even bring in his doctor. Here's what I told him. I told him, don't get into any physical altercations. Don't play sports. Don't go to the gym. Don't do this. He figured, well, I'm standing on the side, on the street corner. That's fine. Here comes this crazy guy across the street, smashes me into the concrete. I'm thinking my life is in danger here. Like, that kind of testimony could be very, very powerful here. Of course, we're speculating because we don't know and we haven't talked to this guy.
Exactly. But even his medical condition from that same day could be relevant. What if he hit his head when he hit the ground? Yeah. Maybe he was concussed. Maybe he felt dizzy after being tackled to the ground. He was disoriented during this fight. All of these factors are relevant. But there's one other thing in the video that I noticed that could help us build up a defense. And it's the fact that after Gannon tackles Hayes to the ground, multiple other people try to jump in. And it takes more than a few seconds for them to get Gannon off of Hayes. So here you have what looks like 3 to 4 strong men trying to fight off Gannon, who had also just been shot. And Gannon's still able to put up a fight against all of these men. Even though the Gannon looked a little bit smaller, he was able to put up a large fight, which I think increases Hayes' argument that he had reason to be in fear for his life here. This man was clearly strong, clearly able to put up a fight, even against multiple people.
Yeah, police officers often make the argument that suspects that they go to arrest who might be on meth or other drugs like that are abnormally strong. We don't know if anything was in Mr. Gannon's system at the time. We're totally speculating here, but these are the kinds of things that you really need to very carefully investigate in a case like this, because Hayes is looking at up to 10 years in prison on this case. Also, I'll note that the gun winds up on the sidewalk, so maybe this is a case about a struggle for a firearm. You may have two people struggling for a firearm, and here it goes off, or something along those lines. That also changes sort of the scope of the analysis. So I think this is more complex than just, hey, you don't get to bring a gun to a fist fight. I think there's, an initial, when you initially look at it and you initially think about it, okay, great, you don't get to shoot somebody because you're in a fist fight with the person. But I think that upon a closer inspection here, there's a lot more here that might get you into a reasonable concern for great bodily injury. And that's really where you need to be in order to threaten or use deadly physical force. So I also think it's probably the wrong thing for the prosecutor to just have gone ahead and charged this guy, because they don't know the answers to these questions either.
They don't.
Right? This guy was arrested and hauled in and charged right away and released on bond. Why put this? I mean, we don't know if he has a record. My guess is he probably doesn't, right? I'm assuming he is an honorably discharged Iraqi war veteran. Probably doesn't have much of a record, if he has any record at all. Probably not much of a danger to the community, not much of a flight risk. Why not just wait as a prosecutor and say, you know what? Before we just go off half-cocked and charge this guy with a 10-year type of a crime, let's be responsible prosecutors and investigate the case and run down some of these issues that you and I have been talking about in this video and make a rational decision about charging this guy or not, rather than just haul him into court. And why is the judge even putting a bond on this guy? And why are you giving him home? I mean, isn't he presumed innocent? I don't like any of this.
They gave him a curfew here.
I know.
He has to wear GPS on the weekends, and then on the weekday, he has a curfew. It's absolutely ridiculous. And you were spot on in saying, I think prosecutors forget the American value of the presumption of innocence. And we see this all the time with prosecutors asking for outrageous bonds in cases like this, and then prosecutors refusing to do what is their job and investigate a case before bringing charges.
Yeah, so I don't like any of that. All of that seems inappropriate to me, but I'm not a prosecutor. That's how they operate sometimes. But in case it's not clear, we'd love to represent this guy. This is a good case. I think Hayes is on the right side of this one. And if I'm the prosecutor, ain't no way I'm charging this case. If I'm on that jury, ain't no way this, unless I hear something different, right? But based on what I know right now, ain't no way I'm coming back with anything other than not guilty on this case. I don't think this is a case where this guy should be convicted. I don't think he should have been charged. On the other hand, I recognize it's probably a little bit closer call than we're maybe making it out to be here, because at the end of the day, we do want to be careful to make sure that the public doesn't get a message that, hey, anytime somebody punches you in the face, you get to shoot them. That's of course not what the law allows. And I think that if we were to bring the Massachusetts prosecutor in here, that's exactly what they're going to say. They're going to say, look, we recognize the other guy was the aggressor. We're charging him at the end of the day as well. But we don't want the public to think that because somebody tackles you, you get to shoot him. And, of course, I would rebut that with, well, a lot more than that is what happened here. So anyways, this is going to be a really fun one to watch and see what happens. I really hope this guy gets a strong defense. They're going to offer him something. He's going to be put in a very tough position, right? Because his choices are going to be, do I go to trial and maybe I get a crazy jury who hates guns? Okay, this is where voir dire comes in. And you really got to be careful and select the right people on the jury. You don't want people who are going to dislike you just because you're carrying a firearm. And there are definitely people out there like that. But he's going to be faced with a choice. Do I go to trial and roll the dice, knowing if I lose, I'm probably going to prison here? Or do I accept some plea that I really don't want, that's likely to get him a felony conviction, strip him of his gun rights, maybe forever? And that's a tough decision. I don't admire anybody in that spot. That's why you really need lawyers who are going to absolutely fully run down every possible legal theory on this case, do all the interviews, file all the motions, get the best possible deal on the table, and then advise him very carefully about what's the risk at trial, what are the good points, bad points. You need a real evaluation of that, and what's the very best plea we can get in this case. And then you got to let the client make the risk determination. But if it's go to trial, let's play to win. And this would be a really fun one to try.
But if I was in Hayes' situation, I think another thing I would be keeping in mind is that this could be potentially a political prosecution, and the jury could consider politics in place of the facts. This is a case that involved a pro-Israel, pro-Palestine component, and I've seen people with the attitude out there that just protesting in favor of Israel is an act of violence in itself. Peaceful protesting is an act of violence, which I think is outrageous to say that, but I see that attitude out there. And in a state like Massachusetts, I think Hayes is going to have to be concerned about the fact that he could have individuals on his jury that may be pro-Palestine, maybe pro-Israel, and could make their decision based on that factor rather than the facts of the case. So even beyond a normal self-defense case, I think that adds a whole nother layer on whether or not you want to take this one to trial.
No question. It's an excellent point. You really got to be careful about that. And also, raises the question in my mind, if this thing's going to trial, does either side bring a motion in limine saying, hey, it's actually irrelevant who was on what side, what the protest was about. Maybe we try to sanitize that. And in the cases presented that there was a political protest and some people were on one side, this guy was on the other side, and here's what happened. And you got to, of course, block out the different flags and this and that in the video. Maybe people figure it out on themselves. But technically, it's probably not relevant who was on what side here. And so either side may try to exclude that kind of evidence and get it out of the trial. So it'll be interesting to see what a judge says. And also, it's not clear to me whether you want it in or not, right? If we were defending him, you're in Newton, Mass. First of all, you're in Massachusetts, and this is a left-wing state, and so you have concerns that there's going to be far more pro-Palestinian people here. On the other hand, Newton, Mass. is a place where there's definitely some pro-Israeli support, and so you have to sort of gauge that as a defense attorney and make a decision about whether you want this coming into that trial. And you may not be able to keep it out. You could see a judge say, hey, look, it's all in here. There's signs, there's flags. We're showing the video. It's just part of what happened here. I'm letting it in. And of course, this would be potentially ripe for appeal if he gets convicted. And so, Andy and I have been doing this Fighting the State series, and we talk a lot about these kinds of issues. I think there's going to be one released here very soon on going to trial. And we talk a lot about these kinds of issues. And also we did one a little while back on motions practice. All of that becomes relevant here. So this is going to be a really fun one to follow. I certainly hope, based on what I know right now, Mr. Hayes gets off this thing clean. I'd sure love to see the prosecutor do what I think is the right thing and just drop the charges here. There's no reason to put this guy through this. I think it's pretty clear he was really just trying to defend himself, and I think he was at risk of great bodily injury based on what happened here. But I understand the other side's argument as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I really look forward to seeing what's going to happen next. His next court date is coming up in November, so I'm excited to see what's going to happen at that hearing. It's probably going to be a boring hearing, an initial pretrial conference type of hearing, but I'm also looking forward to seeing Gannon getting charged and seeing how that prosecution goes as well. I know that charges are coming. Apparently in Massachusetts, a case cannot be charged if an officer does not witness it until a summons is issued. So that's why Gannon was not arrested that same day as Hayes was. So charges are coming for Gannon as well. And I'll be interested to see if both prosecutions continue, if one continues, if one is dropped, maybe both are dropped. So there's a lot coming up in this case.
And there's also, if I was involved in this case, I might go to the prosecutor and say, look, we got an opportunity to do something good here. What if we got these two guys together and they shook hands and they made peace and they jointly issued a statement about, hey, we're in America. We got to get along better. We're all humans. We're brothers. And let's drop the charges against both of them. And, let's have a love fest and try to do something good out there and send a good message out into the world. We've been successful on this at our firm in a few cases where we've been able to do something outside the box. And, look, each is the victim of the other here. And right. So in theory, if their lawyers get together and approach the prosecutor on the two respective cases and say, you know, we think there's a bigger issue here, something we could do good for our country, maybe even a bigger statement on the international stage. And these guys say, you know what, we both recognize that we're both brothers and we're all brothers and sisters, and we have different facts, right? You could see that from the protest, right? One side is calling it a genocide and the other side saying, no, it's not a genocide. Look, you really do have good people on both sides who are mistaken about the facts. And it's the facts that they're arguing about. And this is the case for many issues here. But something bigger and better could be done with this case with a little creative thinking outside the box. And I hope that happens. There may be somebody who's involved in this case will take that suggestion and it'll plant a little seed and maybe encourage them to do something good here for not just the people in the United States and maybe not just these two, maybe even on a global scene, right? This story could become an international story if these two guys could get along and be friends and move on and shake hands and say, hey, we all are against innocent lives being killed. And there are people losing innocent lives here on both sides. We don't want to see innocent people killed. Let's join at least on that point and go forward. So anyways, let's follow this one and see where it goes. I think this will be a very interesting case to follow. Maybe it'll go to trial and we can analyze the thing all the way through.
Yeah, I definitely look forward to seeing what's going to happen next.
All right, so if you're involved in this case, why don't you take that suggestion and do something good, maybe for the whole world on this case. Think outside the box. This case could be used to do something bigger than just an ordinary self-defense case. We got big problems in the world. Think outside the box. Do something big here. That's my challenge to you if you're involved in this case and you're watching this video.
If you would like to learn more about our law firm, check us out at attorneysforfreedom.com. You also can check us out on attorneysonretainer.us. You can learn all about our self-defense protection program there. And we have really exciting news coming. We're going to have the first ever AOR conference this November 8th through 10th. There's going to be many exciting events. You'll get to hear from all of the attorneys at the firm. You'll get to go to a range day, and you'll get to meet some of our influencers as well. So be sure to register. We will have some information in the description, and you can register today. Also, if you liked the video you saw today, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. This was attorneys Rachel Moss and Marc Victor signing off.
Peace.